My name's Harold Tate, 68 years old, retired school janitor, part-time gardener, and apparently an unwanted house guest in my own daughter's home. It happened on a warm Tuesday evening, the kind where the air smells like cut grass and old memories. Megan, my only daughter, stood on her fancy new porch wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than my truck. She had that same look she used to give me when she was 16 and thought she knew everything. Only this time, she wasn't asking for car keys, she was giving me orders. "Sleep there tonight, Dad," she said, pointing at a cedar doghouse I built 5 years ago for her Chihuahua princess. "Kyle's recording his podcast in the guest room, and we need quiet." I just stood there, blinking. For a moment, I thought she was joking. But her husband, Kyle, with that permanent smirk of his, just lifted his phone and said, "Thanks for understanding, Harold. You'll be fine. It's warm out." Warm? Sure. Humiliating? Definitely. Princess barked twice, like she was seconding the motion, then strutted right into the house that was once mine. I looked at that little doghouse, neatly painted. Good craftsmanship, if I do say so myself, and something inside me snapped, but not in anger, more like a quiet click, a memory. I turned and walked toward the garage, my shoes crunching on the gravel, the night suddenly colder. Inside my old coat, still hanging where I left it months ago, was a heavy brass key ring. 3 keys, 3 promises I made myself long ago, in case life ever forgot to be fair. When my fingers closed around them, I felt 20 years younger. I looked back once, saw the porch light turn off, and whispered to Princess through the dark, "Don't worry, girl. You'll be the only one sleeping in that doghouse tonight." Then I opened the garage door, and the world changed in one quiet turn of a key. Because that night, I wasn't the old man they could order around anymore. I was the man they'd soon wish they hadn't underestimated. The first key squeaked in the old garage lock like it hadn't been turned in a decade, probably, because it hadn't. When the door slid open, a smell of oil, dust, and dignity hit me straight in the chest. My little kingdom still stood there. The pegboard full of tools, the red toolbox I bought in '84, my fishing rod leaning like it missed me. And right there, sitting proudly under a dusty tarp, was my silver Airstream, my escape pod, my castle on wheels. Back when June, my late wife, and I bought it, we promised ourselves we'd travel the whole country. She passed before we could, and the trailer just sat here like a museum exhibit of dreams postponed. But not tonight. I pulled the tarp off, coughed like an old engine starting up, and laughed. "Well, June," I muttered, "guess we're finally hitting the road. Only, our passenger list changed." Something moved near the shelves. I froze. Then, from behind a pile of paint cans, stepped a gray cat with one ear and the confidence of a landlord. I hadn't seen him in months. Neighborhood folks called him Captain Whiskers. "Well, Captain," I said, bending down, "seems we both got evicted tonight." He meowed once, then climbed right into the Airstream like he'd been waiting for me to open it all along. That was my sign. I loaded some supplies, grabbed my old cooler, and took one last look at the quiet house through the cracked garage window. Megan's light flicked on upstairs, maybe realizing the old man wasn't in the yard anymore. I smiled, started the truck, and whispered, "Don't wait up, sweetheart." As the tires rolled over the gravel, Princess barked once, a short, confused sound that felt like a goodbye. And when I hit the road, the night opened up ahead, like a promise I'd forgotten I still deserved. But little did I know, by morning, my disappearance would turn my daughter's perfect suburban life completely upside down. By sunrise, the highway was mine. The truck hummed, the Airstream followed behind like an obedient old friend, and Captain Whiskers sat on the passenger seat, staring at me as if I owed him gas money. We stopped at a roadside diner somewhere near Pine Hollow, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like burnt hope, but the waitresses call you honorable. I walked in, dusty, wrinkled, and smiling wider than I had in years. "Morning, sunshine?" said a waitress named Doris, judging by the glittery pin on her chest. "You look like you've just escaped something, or someone." "Both," I said, sliding into a booth. Long story short, my daughter promoted me from father to outdoor pet. Doris blinked, poured my coffee and whispered, Lord, give me patience with these new generations. Then louder, to the cook, "That bacon man looks underfed." Captain Whiskers had already claimed the windowsill, tail flicking like he was checking for Yelp reviews. People stared, but no one said a thing. I pulled out my wallet and stared at the photo inside June, smiling on the porch of that same house. Guess we raised her too well, I murmured. Taught her confidence. Forgot about compassion. Doris brought pancakes shaped like hearts. On the house, she said. You look like a man starting over. We root for those here. I left a generous tip and stepped back outside, feeling something I hadn't in years light. Free. The morning air hit me different, like it was finally mine again. I climbed into the truck, patted the dashboard, and told Captain Whiskers, let's go find a place where they don't make old men sleep next to dog food. He yawned, stretched, and curled up in my jacket as the engine rumbled alive. But while I was tasting freedom for the first time in decades, my daughter was waking up to a nightmare, and the first clue was sitting right on her kitchen counter. Back in suburbia, Megan probably expected to find me snoring in the doghouse with Princess acting as my blanket. Instead, she found an empty lawn, tire tracks in the gravel, and a note on the kitchen island that said, "Staying somewhere I fit, Dad." Now, I wasn't there to see it, but I can picture the scene perfectly. Megan in her fluffy robe, coffee mug shaking, yelling for Kyle like she'd just found out her favorite influencer got canceled. Kyle stumbled down the stairs in gym shorts, rubbing his eyes. Relax, babe. He probably went to the park to talk to squirrels again. He took the truck, Kyle, she snapped. And the trailer! Maybe he finally joined that senior biker gang, Kyle mumbled, scrolling through his phone. They're trending. Meanwhile, about 50 miles away, I was parked by a lake so still it looked like it was holding its breath. Captain Whiskers hopped out first, tail high, acting like he owned the shoreline. I followed with a folding chair, a fishing rod, and a sandwich I'd made out of diner leftovers. I sat down, kicked off my shoes, and just listened. Birds, water, silence. Not a podcast, not a text ping, not a, "Dad, could you move your stuff?" I must have looked ridiculous old man in a flannel shirt, arguing with a cat about whether tuna counts as bait. But I laughed out loud anyway. The kind of laugh that comes from realizing you're not angry anymore, just done. That's when I pulled the third key from my pocket. The one Megan and Kyle didn't know existed, the one to the safe deposit box. Inside it were papers that would make their manicured eyebrows hit the ceiling, because while they thought I was the guest in their house, they were the guests in mine, and soon enough, the truth would knock louder than I ever could. By mid-morning, I was parked in front of Maple Ridge Bank, the same place where June and I once opened our first savings account with a jar of quarters and too much hope. The teller looked like she was 12 and ran on oat milk. "Good morning, sir," she chirped. "How can I help you today?" I slid the key across the counter like a magician revealing his last trick. "I'd like to see box 312. She blinked. "You're the owner?" "Unless my cat forged my signature, yes." 5 minutes later, I was in that little private room with the box on the table. The air smelled like paper and old secrets. Inside, a folder, a few photos, and a small envelope labeled, "For Megan, when she forgets who I am." I didn't open it, not yet. I pulled out the folder instead. Inside were the house papers. The real ones. The ones showing that the deed was transferred solely to me after June's passing. See, Megan and Kyle thought they'd inherited everything. What they didn't know was that their fancy guest house was technically my secondary property. I just never said it out loud because, well, what kind of father keeps score? Apparently, a well-prepared one. I left the bank feeling 10 pounds lighter, mostly because I'd also cashed out my small pension, which wasn't much, but it felt like freedom printed on green paper. Captain Whiskers waited by the truck, batting at a pigeon like he'd just secured lunch. "You and me, Cap," I said, starting the engine. "They've got Wi-Fi and stress. We've got wheels and dignity." As I drove off, I couldn't help but chuckle imagining Kyle's face when he'd find out who really owned the house. His podcast audience might finally hear some real emotion, but before that truth hit them, something else would, and it came in the form of a police visit that made the neighbors choke on their morning muffins. It must have been around lunchtime when Officer Raymond knocked on Megan's door, a man built like a refrigerator and about as talkative. "Ma'am," he said, holding up my note, "is this your father's handwriting?" Megan clutched her pearls like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "Yes, has something happened to him?" Kyle peeked from behind the door, holding a protein shake. "Wait, is this about the doghouse thing? Because that was her idea, not mine." Raymond raised an eyebrow. "Doghouse thing?" Megan glared at Kyle. "Not now, Kyle." Then she turned back, fake tears loading up. "Officer, he left suddenly. We think he's lost, confused, maybe emotional." The officer looked unimpressed. "He withdrew a decent sum of money this morning and was seen driving off in a silver truck with an Airstream trailer. He didn't look confused, ma'am. He looked retired." Meanwhile, I was parked at a campground 3 towns away, grilling sausages with a guy named Earl who lived out of a converted school bus and claimed he'd been temporarily divorced since 1998. Captain Whiskers sat by the fire, glaring at Earl's sausage like it owed him rent. "You sure you're not running from something, Harold?" Earl asked. "Nope," I said, flipping a sausage. "I'm running to something peace and indoor plumbing I actually paid for." He nodded solemnly. "Can't argue with that." Back at Megan's place, the neighborhood grapevine was already fermenting. Mrs. Talbot from next door told everyone I'd run off with a young nurse from the pharmacy. Kyle didn't deny it, apparently. It boosted his podcast engagement. If only they knew the truth. Because the next envelope Megan opened wasn't from the police, it was from my lawyer. And that's when the real fireworks began. By Friday morning, Megan's neighborhood WhatsApp group had officially exploded. There were more theories about my disappearance than about Bigfoot. One neighbor swore she saw me boarding a yacht with a younger woman. Another claimed I'd joined a retirement commune that raised alpacas for therapy. Meanwhile, Megan was pacing her kitchen in a panic robe when the doorbell rang. Kyle opened it, and there stood Mr. Hughes, my old lawyer, in his usual tweed suit that looked allergic to ironing. "Good morning," he said calmly, stepping inside. "Your father asked me to deliver a few documents." "Documents?" Megan frowned. "What kind?" "The kind that decide who owns this property," Hughes replied, setting down a sealed folder. Kyle dropped his protein shake so hard it looked like modern art on the floor. "Wait, you mean we might not own this house?" "I mean exactly that," Hughes said, smiling the way only lawyers and cats do before chaos. "According to the latest deed, the house and its land remain the sole property of Mr. Harold Tate. You two are," he adjusted his glasses, "tenants, technically." "Tenants!" Megan squeaked. "We paid for new flooring!" "Then consider it a generous donation," Hughes said, heading toward the door. "Mr. Tate wanted me to tell you he appreciates the renovations." Kyle's jaw fell open. "He what?" "Outside. I was watching the sunset by my trailer, flipping through old photos of June. The air smelled like pine and barbecue smoke. Captain Whiskers snored in a camp chair beside me, dreaming of world domination. I raised my coffee mug toward the horizon. That one's for you, Meg. You always wanted control, now you'll finally understand what it costs." Just then, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered. "Dad?" Megan's voice trembled. You had no right." "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly. "You told me to sleep in the doghouse. I just followed your rules only now. The doghouse comes with wheels." "But that call was only the beginning because the next voice I heard wasn't hers. It was Kyle's, and he had a plan that would make even Princess bark in disbelief." "Mr. Tate," Kyle said, his voice smoother than the hair gel he probably used to make that call. "Hey, buddy. How's the open road treating you?" I nearly dropped my mug. "Buddy? The same man who once complained that my slippers clashed with the modern decor?" "Oh, the road's fine, Kyle," I said, eyeing Captain Whiskers as he attempted to wrestle a bag of marshmallows. "Plenty of air, zero podcasts." He laughed that fake, nasal laugh that could curdle milk. "Listen, pal, I was thinking. You know, now that you're traveling and all, maybe we can buy the house from you. To, simplify things." "Buy it?" I chuckled. "With what? Your sponsorships about beard oil?" Silence. Then a nervous cough. "We'll figure something out. Megan's really upset. She hasn't eaten in 2 days." "Ah, I said. Diet's working then. Even Captain Whiskers looked impressed by that one. Look, Kyle, I sighed, softening just a little. I didn't leave to hurt her. I left because I was tired of being treated like furniture. You and my daughter built a nice life, but you forgot who laid the foundation. He hesitated. So you're not coming back? No, I said. But I'll send her something better than my return, a reminder. I hung up before he could respond. Later that night, under the glow of a lantern, I opened June's old tin box. Inside were faded letters, an extra set of house keys, and a photo of all three of us, back when smiles didn't need explanations. I turned the photo over. June's handwriting read, "If they ever forget where they came from, remind them gently." I looked up at the stars, then at Captain Whisker's sprawled belly, up beside the campfire. Gently, huh? Guess we'll try that first. But by the next morning, my gentle reminder would make Megan drop her coffee, Kyle spill his green smoothie, and half the neighborhood think I'd joined a cult. I woke up early the next morning with a plan, and 2 slices of cold bacon stuck to Captain Whisker's fur. He didn't mind. That cat could survive an earthquake and still demand breakfast. The plan was simple. Remind my daughter that love isn't a service, it's a gift. And gifts don't come when you bark orders. So I drove to the small-town post office, the kind with an old flagpole and a clerk named Barb who looked like she'd been there since Nixon. "Morning, Harold," she said. "Still running away or just on vacation?" "Bit of both," I grinned, sliding a padded envelope across the counter. "Need this delivered express." To my daughter. Should shake up her morning. Inside that envelope was a photo of the house from 30 years ago, freshly painted, June planting tulips, little Megan in overalls holding my hand. On the back, I'd written, "You told me to sleep outside, but once upon a time, you used to fall asleep on my chest in that same yard. Remember who built your home? And for the punchline, I added a keychain shaped like a dog bone, engraved, 'Reserved for Princess.'" Barb laughed so hard she almost dropped the stamp. "You sure you don't want to include a leash too?" "Nah," I said. "They've already tied themselves up with pride." When I walked out, I felt lighter. The kind of light you get not from revenge, but from balance, like finally setting a heavy box down after carrying it too long. Back at camp, I brewed coffee on the portable stove and watched the mist lift off the lake. Captain Whiskers sat beside me, staring into the distance like a philosopher. Think she'll get the message?" I asked. He yawned, then turned around and sat on my newspaper like it was a throne. That's when my phone pinged a text from an unknown number. "Dad, we need to talk. Please." And that's when I knew the storm wasn't over. It was just coming home to where it began. Her text came at sunrise, and I stared at it like it might bite. "Dad, we need to talk. Please, please, that was new." The last time she'd said please was when she was 10 and wanted ice cream before dinner. So, "Yeah," I called her. "Dad," Megan's voice cracked, a sound I hadn't heard in years. I opened your package." "I figured you would," I said, sipping my coffee. Captain Whiskers was busy pawing at a biscuit, like he planned to sue it. She sniffled. "Why didn't you just tell me you felt unwanted?" "I didn't mean—" "Megan," I cut in softly. "When someone points at a doghouse and says sleep there, it's not exactly open for interpretation." There was silence. Then, quietly, "I didn't think it would hurt you that much." "Well," I said, half smiling, "it hurt about as much as watching Kyle explain crypto at Thanksgiving." She snorted through her tears, and for a moment, just a moment, I heard my little girl again. The one who used to paint my nails during her beauty school phase and promised not to tell the neighbors. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "You were right. I've been so caught up in everything." "Yeah," I said. "Life's loud when you don't leave space for the quiet ones." Just then, Captain Whiskers jumped onto the phone, meowing so loud she laughed. "Is that a cat?" she asked. "Assistant manager," I replied. "Runs payroll and morale." We talked for an hour, really. Talked about June, about the house, about how easy it is to mistake love for convenience. When we hung up, I felt lighter, but not done. Because forgiveness doesn't rebuild a bridge. It just shows you where to start hammering again. and I had one last nail to drive in something to make both of us remember what home really meant. That's why, the very next day, I parked the Airstream right where it all began and waited for her to find me. I pulled into town at dusk, the kind of dusk that smells like barbecues and regret. The streets were quiet, just porch lights flickering on and dogs announcing my arrival like I was the ice cream truck of bad memories. I parked the Airstream right in front of my old house. Not sneaky, not dramatic. Just there, like a missing puzzle piece that rolled under the couch and finally came back home. The porch light flicked on. A curtain moved. Then the door opened. Megan stepped out, barefoot, hair in a messy bun, wearing that same college sweatshirt she used to sleep in when life was simpler. She froze when she saw me, and then she saw the Airstream hitched behind the truck. "You really brought it here," she said, half laughing, half crying. "Well," I said, climbing out. "You told me to sleep outside. Figured I'd take the doghouse on tour." She rolled her eyes, but smiled that same stubborn, sideways smile June used to give me when she lost an argument but pretended she hadn't. From inside the trailer, Captain Whiskers appeared on the dashboard like a dramatic stage actor, stretching in slow motion. "Is that a cat?" she asked. "Management," I said. "Keeps morale high." Megan laughed for real this time. The kind that starts small and ends up echoing through the whole street. For a second, the years between us didn't matter. Then she looked at me. "Serious now. Dad, I'm sorry. I was awful to you. Kyle too. We just thought we were doing the grown-up thing. Setting boundaries." "Boundaries are fine, sweetheart," I said gently. "But don't build fences so tall you can't see who's still loving you from the other side." We stood there in silence, the porch light buzzing, the crickets doing their best soundtrack work. Then Princess waddled out, saw me, and wagged her tail so hard she fell over. Even she remembered. Megan chuckled through her tears. "Looks like someone missed you. Guess she's the only one who still had my back," I said, kneeling to pet the little traitor. But I wasn't done yet because there was one last surprise waiting inside that Airstream, the kind that could fix more than just a broken heart. Megan followed me toward the Airstream, hesitant, wiping her eyes like a kid caught sneaking cookies. "Dad, what are you doing?" "You'll see," I said, opening the door with a dramatic flair that would have made June proud. "Step inside." She hesitated, then climbed up. And there it was, my little rolling museum of memories. The checkered curtains June sewed, the faded map of America on the wall, with pins marking all the places we planned to visit, the kettle that still whistled like an angry bird, and on the small table by the window, a photo album. I handed it to her. "Before you tell me again that I'm old-fashioned or stubborn, look at these." She sat down and began flipping through the pages. There was her first birthday, frosting in her hair. Her high school graduation, me in the world's ugliest tie. A picture of the three of us at the lake, June splashing us with water. Megan laughed and cried at the same time. "God, Mom would have smacked me for how I treated you." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "She'd have used a good wooden spoon, too." That made her laugh even harder. And for the first time in years, the sound didn't sting, it healed. Captain Whiskers hopped onto her lap like he'd been assigned emotional support duty. Princess, not to be outdone, jumped in after him, and the two animals started a low-stakes staring contest that ended with a hiss and a sneeze. "Still better behaved than Kyle," I said. She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "He's inside. Packing." "Packing?" I raised a brow. "Yeah," she said quietly. We're taking a break. Maybe a long one. He doesn't understand family the way you do." "Well," I sighed, pouring us both tea. "He'll learn. Or he won't. But you already started." She nodded slowly, running a finger over June's handwriting on one of the photo captions. "Home is not a place. It's the people who wait for you." We sat in silence, 2 cups steaming, 2 dogs snoring, 1 cat plotting world domination. But that night wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about something better. Something we both thought we'd lost forever. A second chance. Megan stayed the night not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She said she couldn't face that empty, echoing house alone. I told her she could have the couch in the Airstream, but she laughed. Dad, you realize the couch is smaller than my yoga mat? Then it's perfect, I said. Teaches humility. Comes free with tea and unsolicited advice. She rolled her eyes, but stayed anyway. I made us grilled cheese on the old camping stove, a little burnt on the edges, but that's how June used to make them. Megan took a bite and blinked back tears. It tastes like Saturday mornings. Good, I said. That's the only kind of therapy I can still afford. We sat outside under the porch light, 2 mugs of cocoa in hand, watching the quiet neighborhood where I'd once fixed every mailbox and shoveled every driveway. People walked by, whispering, maybe shocked to see the old man back. But now, it was Megan sitting beside him. After a while, she said softly, You know, when Mom died, I thought I had to become strong. The one in charge. I didn't realize strong doesn't mean cold. I nodded. Yeah, sometimes strength is just knowing when to hand someone a blanket instead of a lecture. She smiled, half crying again, and said, I don't deserve you. Sure you do, I said, nudging her shoulder. You're just a late bloomer in the Department of Gratitude. Inside, Captain Whiskers had taken over my pillow, while Princess guarded the door like a furry bouncer. Megan pointed. Guess I'll sleep sitting up. Hey, you kicked me out once. I grinned. Now the pets return the favor. Poetic justice. She laughed, really laughed, the way people do when forgiveness finally replaces guilt. The crickets played backup, the Airstream glowed warm in the night, and for a long time, neither of us said a word. But I still had one last thing to give her, not out of pride, but love. Something that would remind her what family truly means, even after the laughter fades. The next morning, Megan woke up to the smell of bacon, coffee, and a cat paw batting at her hair. Dad, she groaned, your cat's attacking me. He's not attacking, I said, flipping pancakes. He's testing your reflexes. You failed. She stretched, hair sticking out in every direction, wrapped in one of my old flannel shirts. For a moment, she looked 12 again, back when she'd steal my shirts just because they smelled like home. I set 2 plates down. Breakfast of champions or fugitives, depends who asks. She laughed. You really could live like this, huh? Why not? I shrugged. I've got wheels, coffee, a cat, and now apparently a house guest, who snores louder than both combined. Her smile faded into something softer. Dad, I want you to move back in. Please, the house feels wrong without you. I looked out the window. The morning sun was turning the Airstream silver. Birds landing on the roof like they were giving their approval. Sweetheart, that's your home now. You and Princess can fill it with new laughter. But it was our home, she said, voice trembling. And I forgot that. I forgot you built everything that made it feel safe. I poured her another coffee. You didn't forget, Meg. You just needed a little silence to hear it again. She wiped her eyes and chuckled. You always talk like you're narrating a movie, you know that? Can't help it, I grinned. The academy still hasn't called, but I like to be prepared. We ate in peace, the kind that comes after storms. Even Captain Whiskers sat politely on the counter at least, until he tried to steal a pancake. When Megan finished, she reached across the table, took my hand, and whispered, I don't want to lose you again. You won't, I said, squeezing back. You just had to remember where to find me. Not in the doghouse, but right here. Her eyes welled up. You're coming back, then? I smiled. No, honey, you're coming with me. Because what I planned next wasn't about running away anymore. It was about finally keeping a promise I'd made long ago to the woman who started it all. We left that same afternoon. No drama, no tears, just a quiet understanding that sometimes coming home means leaving the driveway behind. Megan packed a single suitcase, tucked Princess under her arm, and followed me to the truck. Captain Whiskers gave her a suspicious glare, but I told him to mind his manners. We were a family again, even if a weird one. As the Airstream rolled down the familiar street, Megan looked back at the house, her perfect, polished cage, and whispered, I can't believe I made you sleep outside. I smiled. You didn't make me, sweetheart. You just reminded me that I still had the keys to freedom. She laughed softly through her tears. Mom would have loved this. Oh, she's probably laughing her head off right now, I said. Especially since I'm letting the cat ride shotgun. We drove for hours, windows down, the wind carrying old stories and new beginnings. At sunset, we stopped by the same lake where June and I used to camp. The water shimmered gold, and the world felt small and kind again. I poured us coffee, and we sat there, father and daughter, two stubborn souls finally learning the same lesson at the same time. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I don't deserve a second chance." "Sure you do," I said. "Everyone does. Even old men who forget where they put their fishing bait." She giggled, wiping her eyes. Princess barked. Captain Whiskers sneezed, and for a moment it felt like June was right there beside us, smiling at how ridiculous and perfect it all was. I looked out at the water and said quietly, "You know, Meg, homes can be rebuilt, but hearts, they just need to be reopened." And as the night settled over the lake, I finally realized I hadn't lost my family. I just needed to remind them how to find me. Because sometimes you have to leave the house to come home again. Tell me in the comments how old you are and where in the world you're watching from. I love knowing where these stories find a home.